Hi folks, Utkarsh here. A quick statutory warning before the video. There is a touch of camera shake in the beginning. It becomes okay, but I just wanted to warn you, some technical issue. I'll get to the bottom of it. Let's go ahead. So this is the most important video that I've made so far concerning the music industry. You're probably not going to like everything I'm going to say. There are some things in here that might actually shock you a little bit. But have some faith, have a little bit of patience as we will get into some slightly non-musical terms, and hopefully by the end of this video there is some value that I may have added to your life as a musician or just someone interested in music. Let's go ahead. So hi everyone, welcome back to the Ministry of Guitar. My name is Utkarsh Mohan. I'm coming to you from Singapore. As always, if you like what I'm doing, please do like, subscribe and share. The growth is really encouraging. As all of you know, I don't do this for a living. I do this for fun, but fun and passion requires affirmation from other human beings. So I really appreciate whatever that you can do. So the genesis of this video is a comment made recently by Spotify's CEO, Daniel Ek. I hope I'm not mispronouncing his name, and the reaction to it. So before I get into the said comment and the said reaction and why this entire episode shows and potentially shows us something very, very important, I want to put a few cards on the table about myself. So, as I said earlier, I'm living in Singapore. So it's one of the financial centers, probably the third financial center after New York and London. So there's that. I have a lot of friends who work in the finance industry, so I do have an understanding of how this thing works. The second part of it is my own background. For those of you who are new to my channel, I did work in corporate senior management for a very, very large company, heading marketing for a very, very large business unit. So I do have some insight into how companies think, how companies try to make money, how companies try to satisfy shareholders. And lastly, beyond all of this, I am, of course, amateur musician and a guitarist and a guitar collector. Cards on the table, done. Let's get into the comment itself. I'm going to open up over here. Daniel Ek. Today, with the cost of creating content being close to zero, people can share an incredible amount of content. This has sparked my curiosity about the concept of long shelf life versus short shelf life. While much of what we see and hear quickly becomes obsolete, there are timeless ideas or even pieces of music that can remain relevant for decades or even centuries. For example, we are witnessing a resurgence of Stoicism, with many of Marcus Aurelius' insights still resonating thousands of years later. This makes me wonder, what are the most unintuitive, yet enduring ideas that aren't frequently discussed today but may have a long shelf life? Also, what are we creating now that will still be valued and discussed hundreds or thousands of years from today? There's the comment. Innocuous enough, but perhaps there is some scope to be a little bit annoyed. And here is the reaction. Musicians outraged as Spotify CEO claims the cost of creating content is close to zero. Our albums took hundreds of hours of human effort, hard work, and creativity. And then there's this entire thing. His comments arrive as Spotify reports record profits, and there's a lot of stuff in here. Now, I want to say two or three things. I think both the sides of this are correct, but not in the most intuitive way. Firstly, Daniel Ek's comment itself, I don't think he's necessarily talking about making albums here. I think probably I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt here. He's talking about just in general how anybody can just pick up a camera and make stuff. That's not really the major point of the message. The major point here is there's so much content nowadays. Out of all of this noise, what will really endure? Which I think is a good point. But I think given his position, he is the CEO of Spotify, I can see why people take away content as music, because that is what is feeding his, that's how he makes his bread and butter. So I see the reaction. I see where people are coming from. But one thing that I interestingly notice is that the reaction is all focused on the cost of creating the album. I'm reading something over here, our albums took hundreds of hours of human effort. At a basic level, you need this equipment, DAW and VSTs. You need monitor speakers, blah, blah, blah. Okay. All correct. But here's the thing. I think it's not even about the cost of making the album. I'm going to be very, very critical right now of the musical industry, so I should quickly say that in general, I do think that Spotify is a net positive. I think the entire Pandora's box of free music had been released in the late 1990s. And at the very least, Spotify found some way to channel some of it back. This is not a full opinion on Spotify. I'll probably do that at some later stage, but I'm just laying the cards on the table. I think Spotify is a net positive. I also generally think Daniel Ek is seems to be, to me, a more uh, principled executive startup founder than many. I think what I saw with the whole Joe Rogan debacle was that he stood behind his employee. I don't know if he's employed, but whatever. He stood behind his people. I have seen so much duplicity in the world of business and high stakes that, if somebody is taking the unpopular position, regardless of their incentives, if someone is taking genuinely unpopular position publicly, you have to give them a little bit of credit for for at least their principles of standing behind people. All this said, I think we are completely missing the point because the music industry, the issue is not that it costs money to make albums and we don't musicians don't get paid so much. I think the problem with the music industry is much, much, much more deeper, and much, much more exploitative. Now, let me explain this to you. A musician making an album or making a song is simply the very, very, very last step in the process of creating that product. That product is created because probably the musician or the instrumentalist has spent hours and hours, years of their life perfecting their craft, whether it be an instrument, whether it be singing. They have spent time that could have been used elsewhere, to earn money, to gain other skills that could earn you money. But all of that time is being spent. Just because it may take you 5 minutes to record a song and maybe another day to produce it, doesn't discount the hundreds and thousands of hours that have gone behind getting to a place where you're good enough to make a song in a certain way. And I'm talking about professional artists here, I'm not talking about me, right? If you're seeing excellence in music, there are hundreds and thousands of man hours and women hours behind it, right? So there's that. So you cannot discount it. It's like a poor analogy, because I'm talking about another industry that's quite exploitative, but a poor analogy is that a pill of a life-saving drug, just to make the pill, may just cost 25 cents. But there are millions of dollars of research behind it, right? So you can't just say that the pill is worth 25 cents, because there are millions of dollars of research that needs to be recouped as a company. So that's an example, right? So here there are, in terms of man hours, in terms of opportunity cost, there is a significant amount of economic value that nobody is counting. Even if you're talking about the cost of equipment, it is completely discounting the cost of your time. It is completely discounting all the other things that you could have done with your life without other than being a musician. So when folks are getting outraged that cost of content is zero, I agree, because it's not zero. It is hours and years and time of your life that has been spent. So there's that aspect. But the bigger point is this. There has always been a duplicity, and I would say sheer malice, in the way the music industry has used and viewed the artists. And I'm going to tell you why. And I'm going to use a simple analogy. If you see Shark Tank, right? So let's put ourselves in a music executive or any business person's shoes, where you have money that you need to leverage. You need to put it behind your business, invest it behind people, invest it behind an idea, invest it behind a company, whatever it might be. So for the music industry, what traditionally happened is you don't know which band is going to make it. So you give a little bit of money to a bunch of bands. One of them makes it, or a few of them make it, and you build your company on the back of that. This approach is not very different to how funds approach funding companies. So when you have startups, you have something very similar happening, because you have hundreds of startups. You don't know which startups will do well. You have no idea. So what you do is you see what you like, similar to how you would be doing for musicians if you're looking at multiple. Actually, a band is a startup in a way, but let's not stretch that. I mean, yes, it is a startup. So, but here in the real startup world, where real companies, what you do is you see a bunch of startups, you put a little bit of money, behind each of them, and some of them hit, some of them become the Amazons and the Googles, and some of them die out, become the Omegals or something. So when you look at it on the surface, the processes are very similar. Yet, why is it that you have so many startup billionaires, and of course musicians, some of them make it, but majority, even people who have played on songs that have had significant cultural impact, that get significant playtime. And this is before the internet era. This is still in the era when you got paid for every copy of music that went. Even in that era, why is it that musicians were simply not that financially successful? It boils down to the exploitative difference between the way business approaches financing startups, business startups, versus financing musicians. And the reason to do this is the difference in the profile of people. Now let's get into each of these things because there's a lot in here. There are two ways you can finance something. There are many ways, but I'm oversimplifying, right? This is not a finance podcast. And again, please, folks, don't get bored. This is important because this will help you really understand why musicians are so exploited. There is debt financing, which is I'm going to let you borrow money from me and you're going to pay me back with some interest. Debt financing. There is equity financing, which is you borrow money from me, but instead I get a stake in your business. Say you give me 10% of your business for $50,000, whatever the numbers might be. The implication with equity financing is that I have a belief that you will do well. So I'm tagging on to you. I believe that money that I've invested with you is worth a lot more because I will get a stake in the big thing that you will make. If I get 10% of Google, you can imagine how big that is. Now, what happens is with startup founders, if you watch Shark Tank and everything, the profile of the kind of person who's starting a business is usually they are very, very they may be dreamers. There are dreamers as musicians, there are dreamers as business people, there are dreamers people who want to start things. But they are generally much better clued into how these sort of things work, how financing works, how Series A, Series B, Series C, whatever it might be. They're clued into all of this. So they are very, very strategic in how they seek financing. They seek, I'll give mostly debt. I'll give a little bit. I will make sure that I retain at least 50-60% of equity so that it's my company, it's my startup. I'll have some debt financing. I will give equity financing. But certainly no one's going to exploit me because I know better. And even the way business people think is when you're starting a business, you're all about trying to make money. So it's a very, very left brain, relatively logical enterprise. Of course, you're trying to, you're a dreamer and you have this vision for the world, but it is a very, very analytical, numeric exercise. That's the startup. So businesses know this. So when you look at how hedge funds or how whoever it might be who's investing in startups, it's a very hard-nosed negotiation. Everybody is very, very much on the same table, and that's how it works. There are still great deals that sometimes funds get. They take advantage of insecurities of startup founders, but nonetheless, it is still a very equitable process, relatively speaking. Now with musicians, think of musicians, right? We are dreamers. We just want to play music. We just want to make a song that everybody loves, that a huge crowd sings. Could not be bothered about these details of this, how this thing is funded, or beyond that, because playing music is such a passion that you are kind of shocked that wait, somebody's paying me money, right? It's like almost like you don't think you deserve it. Often, especially in the beginning, right? If you listen to a lot of band interviews, which I have done, they'll always talk about how they got say $10,000 to record an album, and they couldn't believe it that someone was paying them money to sit and record an album. So, that's kind of the mindset where you're a dreamer. You cannot believe that somebody is going to pay you money for a living. And this dreaming attitude and this everything is very nice. But what happens is you get exploited. And the reason you get exploited is the way record companies and have typically financed musicians is through a very, very exploitative, worst of both worlds of equity and debt financing. Let me explain this to you. So what they do is they do debt financing, which is that they give you a certain amount of money to make an album. And what happens is that money is recouped first from the album sales, right? This is how it used to traditionally work. So it's debt financing, but you are assuming all the risk, you, the artist, because they're going to give you the money. And there is risk, of course, if your albums don't sell at all. But if your album has some modicum of sales, you don't get any money in. It's all It's all going to the company first, and then the real killer is equity. You lose a majority of the equity. You essentially are getting, rather than in a startup founder where you are the majority equity holder, here you get a tiny piece of the equity. Most of the money made on the on your music is goes to the company. So it's the worst of both worlds. You get debt financing with a lot of risk, not much return, and you lose out on all the equity. It's shocking, honestly, when you look at through finance terms, right? No startup founder would ever agree to that. Like, why am I making myself essentially a slave, pardon my French, take assuming doing all the work, right? And then this is the terms that I get, and this is after I have spent hours and years perfecting, like especially for a musician, right? You spend hours and years of base of time that could have been spent elsewhere, opportunity cost, huge economic cost to get to this point. So the economics of this piece are just crazy. So, you know, musicians are probably, and I'm not sure about other industries, but when it comes to startup ventures, because face it, whether you're a band, whether you're a name like Coldplay or Nirvana, or whether you're a company like Facebook or Meta, sorry, they're the same. What am I saying? Like Meta or Twitter, it's the same thing. You're creating a property. You are either people are engaging you or people are listening to you, right? It's a property at the end of the day. It's a commercial enterprise. A band is a commercial enterprise. It is shocking to me the double standard by which the way the bands have been funded, right? It is just literally these musicians, they are dreamers, they don't know shit about how finance works. They're just happy if someone pays them something to play music. Let us exploit the shit out of them. This, for me, is one of the things that is, I'm generally a big fan. I am a big fan of capitalism. I keep saying this. But then sometimes you have exploitative capitalism just because you can. And this is exploitative. This generally is. Now, the good news is these days, 2 or 3 things have happened, which is that in general, everyone is a lot more aware. I mean, this is not the era of the 60s and 70s where you had bands which made a shitload of money and then they found out they earned nothing. Like, I think the Beatles, one of the things that prompted them to create their own record company was they realized that they made it, but ultimately they were getting nothing from what they made, or very little. So today, people are generally more aware because of the internet. Everybody is more financially aware. Secondly, the back of the record label has been broken because the business model of selling CDs or tapes has been broken. You still have a business model of streaming, which is quite not great, but a lot more musicians are able to exploit it in an independent fashion today. So it's gotten better in terms of exploitation, but I think it's very important for us to sometimes take a step back from our craft or our art and just think about why things are the way they are. It's easy to sit and complain that nobody pays for music anymore, all of that, and all of this is true. But you have to also recognize that what has traditionally happened is that the pie that you are generating as a musician, you get like this much, versus the pie that is generated by a business, the founders get this much. And that gap is only because, one, you don't have the, and again, I'm not blaming anyone, I'm just saying how we think as musicians, as creative people. It is because you believe it is a privilege to play music. It is a privilege to play music, but that does not mean the market can exploit you on it. So while you may be thankful to yourself and to the powers that be for the ability to play music and make money from it, you have to be hard-nosed in terms of how that the monetization of that of your hard work is done. Secondly, you have to give yourself, and the time that you have spent on becoming great at an instrument or perfecting your craft, you have to give it respect, you have to give it economic value. So if Daniel Ek says cost of creating content is zero, it is not zero. It is the 10,000 hours of practice. That 10,000 hours, if I had done a part-time job, could have earned me 100K or whatever the minimum wage is. It doesn't mean I will do minimum wage. That is real time and effort. That is real opportunity cost. So yeah, this is my point. My point is businesses have exploited musicians simply because musicians are dreamers and they are not as financially aware. So continue dreaming, continue doing, continue trying to add value to the world, but please educate yourself a little bit. This video is just a starting point. If you want to understand how financing works, there's a very good video by Bill Ackman. He just explains financing in like 20 minutes. Just watch that. I thought of all the content that I've seen, I thought that explained it pretty well because he uses an apple cart example, starting an apple stall, sorry. Apple stall, or was it orange juice stall? Something to do with fruits. But watch that. It was very good. All right. I hope this was helpful. Let me know what you think. I hope you were able to get something new from this video. As always, I've been Utkarsh Mohan, and I'll see you next time.